Paris glowed outside the windows, but inside Chanel's design office the atmosphere had curdled. After the fitting, nothing was the same. Every hallway seemed to hum with whispers, every glance lingered longer than before. Amélie felt it each time she walked into the studio, the sudden hush, the narrowed eyes, the way conversations broke off as if she were an intruder in her own workplace. She had dared to speak in front of Jennie. She had dared to show her work. And for that, the backlash now unfolded quietly, mercilessly. Claire's orders became sharper, more suffocating. Amélie was assigned menial tasks, sorting fabric swatches, cataloging accessories, preparing mood boards that others would present. Antoine strutted through the office with renewed arrogance, his smile brittle but vicious. Whenever their eyes met, his smirk said everything, "I will bury you." Yet beneath the surface, Amélie felt a flicker of strength. Jennie had seen her. Jennie had chosen her vision. That truth, fragile as glass, burned inside her like a secret flame. At night, when the office emptied, she and Ethan resumed their quiet war. They worked in shadows, documenting every step of her process. Ethan photographed each sketch, each pinned sample, each adjustment. Amélie refined her design obsessively, cutting, stitching, testing fabrics late into the night. Her hands blistered, her eyes burned, but the dress grew stronger, sleeker, sharper, impossible to ignore. One evening, as she adjusted a seam under the glow of a desk lamp, Ethan leaned against the wall, watching. "You know," he said softly, "you're not just designing a dress anymore. You're designing proof of yourself." Amélie looked up, exhausted but resolute. "Then it has to be perfect." Their alliance deepened in those quiet hours. He became her anchor, reminding her she wasn't insane, that her vision mattered. And she became bolder, more willing to push against the boundaries set for her. But each step forward carried risk. The first sabotage came 2 days later. Amélie returned from a brief coffee break to find her sketches gone from her desk. Panic surged through her chest as she tore through drawers, searched bins, scoured every corner. Nothing. Her heart thundered until she spotted them, crumpled, discarded in the trash. Pages torn, edges smudged, as if someone had meant to erase her entirely. She knew who. When she confronted Antoine with trembling fists, he only raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "Careless of you, leaving work unattended," he drawled. "This is Chanel, not a school project. If you can't protect your own ideas, perhaps you don't deserve them." Her hands shook with fury, but she said nothing. She couldn't. To accuse him openly without undeniable proof would hand Claire the excuse she wanted to expel her. So she swallowed the rage and returned to Ethan, who quietly photographed the ruined pages, filing them alongside everything else in their secret archive. But the message was clear: Antoine was watching. Claire was watching. Every move Amélie made was under surveillance, every mistake sharpened into a weapon. Still, she pressed on. At the next team review, Claire deliberately skipped over Amélie, calling instead on junior designers with safer, weaker concepts. Antoine presented again, his prototype further along, polished and gleaming. Claire praised him openly, her approval ringing like a gavel. Amélie sat silent, the weight of invisibility crushing her. Yet when Jennie's name was mentioned, a ripple of unease spread through the room. Everyone remembered Jennie's words, "This feels real." And though Claire tried to bury it, the seed had been planted. Later that night, as Amélie sewed in the quiet, Ethan approached with his camera. "They're afraid of you," he said. "Afraid?" she asked bitterly. "They're destroying me." "Exactly," Ethan said. "If you were nothing, they wouldn't bother. But you're not nothing. You're the spark they can't control. That terrifies them." She paused, needle trembling between her fingers. His words sank deep, turning fear into resolve. From then on, she worked like a ghost. She spoke little, drew less attention, but each night her secret creation grew. Hidden stitches, hidden seams, hidden strength. She guarded it like a weapon, waiting for the moment when all eyes would be forced to see. The war was silent, but no less brutal. Each day chipped at her spirit, each night rebuilt it. Each glance from Claire was a threat, each smirk from Antoine a taunt. Yet still, she endured. And as Paris Fashion Week loomed closer, Amélie knew, the storm was gathering. The runway would not just reveal a dress. It would reveal the truth, or bury it forever. She pressed the final sketch flat against the table, tracing its lines with steady fingers. Her reflection in the glass window stared back, tired but unbroken. This was no longer about survival. This was about destiny. And she swore, as the Eiffel Tower lights flickered in the distance, that when Jennie stepped onto that runway, it would not be in Antoine's shadow. It would be in Amélie's light. The week before Paris Fashion Week arrived like a tightening noose. The entire office lived in a fever pitch, late nights, endless fittings, nervous tempers. Every corner smelled of fabric glue, steaming silk, and strong coffee. Deadlines loomed like thunderclouds, and beneath them, rivalry sharpened into weapons. For Amélie, each day was survival. She walked the halls with lowered eyes, endured Claire's icy commands, Antoine's smug victories. Yet each night she returned to her hidden workspace, where her true design waited, stitched, sculpted, alive. She had poured herself into it completely. The cropped tweed jacket, reimagined with asymmetrical lines, the satin dress cut like flowing armor, pearls threaded like constellations across the fabric. It was daring, unapologetic. It was hers. But power never yields quietly. It began subtly, a missing spool of thread here, a fabric roll misplaced there. Amélie brushed it off, though unease grew. Then came the sharper blow. She returned from a brief meeting to find her mannequin toppled, fabric slashed by something sharper than scissors. Her nearly finished prototype lay in ruins, seams ripped open, pearls scattered like broken teeth across the floor. Her breath vanished. She fell to her knees, hands trembling as she gathered the torn pieces. Rage surged, but stronger than rage was despair. Days of work, nights of sacrifice, shredded in seconds. From the doorway, laughter echoed. Antoine leaned casually against the frame, his smirk gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Accidents happen in this business," he drawled. "Perhaps your work simply couldn't withstand the pressure." Her chest burned. She wanted to scream, to lunge at him, to claw the smugness off his face. But she forced herself still, nails biting her palms. To fight him here would be to lose. When he finally sauntered away, she collapsed into her chair, head buried in her arms. For the first time since arriving at Chanel, tears spilled hot and unrestrained. Maybe she had been foolish to believe she could survive this place. Maybe talent wasn't enough against power sharpened into cruelty. The sound of a camera click startled her. She lifted her head to find Ethan crouched nearby, lens capturing the wreckage. His voice was quiet but fierce. "We'll show them. Every cut, every sabotage, every truth. We'll show them all." Her tears slowed. His eyes met hers, steady as steel. And in that gaze, she found something stronger than despair, defiance. Together, they began again. Amélie salvaged what she could, recutting fabric, stitching new seams with blistered fingers. Ethan documented each step, the shredded prototype, the repairs, her exhaustion written across her face. The camera became her shield, proof of every battle fought in silence. But sabotage continued. One night she discovered her sketches soaked in spilled coffee. Another morning, her sewing machine jammed, the bobbin deliberately tampered with. Each time, she rebuilt. Each time, Ethan captured the evidence. And each time, the fire inside her burned hotter. The tension finally snapped during a late-night work session. Claire entered without warning, her heels clicking ominously against the floor. She circled Amélie's desk like a hawk, eyes raking over the repaired prototype. "You persist," Claire said coolly. "But persistence is not talent. Do you think one fitting with Jennie makes you indispensable? You're a child playing in a kingdom built by giants." Amélie swallowed hard, but her voice steadied. "Then maybe it's time the giants remembered what it feels like to dream." For a heartbeat, Claire froze. Her eyes narrowed to slits. Then she leaned closer, whispering like venom. "Dreams are fragile. And fragile things break." With that, she left, the air colder in her absence. Amélie's hands shook, but not from fear anymore. She turned to Ethan. "They'll try to erase me completely." Ethan lifted his camera. "Then we'll make sure the world sees before they can." As the clock struck midnight, Amélie stitched the final pearl onto her gown. Her body ached, but her spirit blazed. The prototype stood gleaming under the lamp, defiant and unbroken. She stepped back, chest heaving, eyes wet with exhaustion and triumph. "They can tear it down 100 times, she whispered. "I'll build it 101. The sabotage had been unveiled, the war no longer silent. And as Paris Fashion Week approached, Amélie knew, the battlefield was ready. Soon, the world would choose. The days before Paris Fashion Week passed like a drumbeat, each one louder, faster, heavier. The city throbbed with anticipation. Billboards gleamed with Chanel's name, the press speculated about Jennie's look, and paparazzi camped outside the headquarters like vultures waiting for a feast. Inside, the tension reached breaking point. Amélie felt it with every step, eyes tracking her in corridors, whispers following her like smoke. She had survived sabotage, endured humiliation, and rebuilt her prototype from ashes. Yet she knew the war wasn't over. It wasn't even close. The confrontation came on a gray afternoon. Claire summoned her to the executive conference room, an austere space with glass walls and a long, gleaming table. Antoine was already there, leaning back in his chair with a glass of sparkling water, his smile poisonous. "Sit," Claire commanded. Amélie obeyed, clutching her sketch folder tight. Her chest pounded, but her face remained calm. She had learned to mask the storm within. Claire's voice was smooth, deliberate. "You've caused disruption, Amélie. Jennie is intrigued by you, yes. But Chanel is not a playground for untested dreams. This house was built on discipline, hierarchy, and trust. You have ignored that." Antoine chimed in, feigning sympathy. "We understand your passion. Truly. But passion without control is dangerous. It risks not only your reputation but Chanel's." Amélie bit her tongue. She had heard these words before, twisted to sound like wisdom but meant only to suppress. Claire folded her hands. "Here is the situation. Jennie will wear Antoine's prototype. It is polished, complete, safe. Chanel cannot risk scandal. But," she paused, her eyes glinting. "We will allow you to remain here. Quietly. As long as you step back. No more disruptions. No more defiance. Do this, and you may still have a career. The ultimatum. Step aside or be destroyed." Amélie's pulse hammered in her ears. She pictured Jennie on the runway, draped in Antoine's theft, the world applauding while her true vision rotted in silence. She imagined her own future, years of invisibility, her name never spoken, her designs swallowed by others. Her hands tightened around the folder. She thought of Ethan's camera, of the evidence he had collected. She thought of Jennie's sharp eyes, the way she had said, "This feels real." And she realized this was not about survival anymore. It was about truth. Her voice trembled at first, but then steadied, sharp as a blade. You can bury me. You can erase my name. But you cannot erase the truth. That design is mine. Jennie knows it. And soon, the world will know too. Antoine's smile cracked. Careful, he hissed. Arrogance destroys faster than failure. Amélie turned her gaze to Claire. Maybe arrogance is pretending Chanel belongs only to the past. Maybe it belongs to the future too. To voices like mine. The words hung heavy in the room. Claire's expression darkened, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Then you've made your choice. Antoine leaned forward, his smirk returning, though thinner now. Enjoy your fall, little star. It will be quick. They dismissed her without another word. Amélie walked out, her legs trembling, her heart a thunderstorm. For a moment, fear clawed at her throat, fear of what they could do, how easily they could crush her. But then Ethan appeared at the end of the corridor, camera slung across his chest, eyes steady. What happened? He asked. They gave me an ultimatum, she said, breathless. Step back or be erased. And? She met his gaze, fire blazing in her eyes. I chose to fight. Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile. Then we'll make sure you win. That night, in the quiet of the studio, Amélie laid out her prototype one last time. The fabric gleamed under the lamplight, alive with the spirit she had poured into it. She traced the lines with trembling fingers, whispering to herself. They can try to silence me. But this will speak louder than all of them. The ultimatum had been delivered. And Amélie had refused to bow. Now, Paris Fashion Week loomed like Judgment Day. The runway would decide everything, her fate, her truth, her survival. And she swore, as the Eiffel Tower's lights shimmered in the night, that when Jennie stepped onto that stage, it would not be Antoine's victory. It would be hers. Paris pulsed with anticipation. The night before Fashion Week was unlike any other. Streets glittered with photographers, luxury cars lined the boulevards, and the Seine shimmered beneath 1,000 city lights. Every designer, model, and journalist seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the moment the world would turn its gaze to the runway. Inside Chanel headquarters, the tension was unbearable. Staff moved like shadows, rushing garments to final fittings, adjusting hems, steaming fabrics until they fell like liquid. The air buzzed with caffeine, nerves, and barely concealed panic. Amélie stood at her workstation, the dress she had fought for gleaming on the mannequin before her. The asymmetrical tweed jacket glimmered under the lamplight, bold yet timeless. Satin flowed like armor around the body, pearls stitched across the fabric like stars scattered in the night sky. It was everything she had dreamed, and everything they had tried to destroy. She touched the fabric lightly, almost reverently. This was no longer just a garment. It was her voice, her defiance, her survival stitched into every seam. Yet the weight of fear pressed down harder than ever. Claire's ultimatum still echoed in her ears, step aside or be erased. Antoine's smirk haunted her like a ghost, his confidence unshaken. Tomorrow, the runway would decide her fate. Tomorrow, the world would either see her truth or watch it vanish forever. Ethan approached quietly, camera slung across his shoulder. He had been her anchor through every storm, documenting her process, preserving evidence of every sabotage. Now he stood beside her, eyes scanning the gown. It's ready, he said softly. Is it? Amélie whispered. Her hands shook as she adjusted a pearl. What if it isn't enough? What if they bury me anyway? Ethan shook his head firmly. No. This is more than enough. They can bury names, but they can't bury brilliance. When Jennie walks out tomorrow, the world won't care about politics or power. They'll care about this. He gestured to the dress. Your truth. Her chest tightened, but his words steadied her trembling. She looked into his eyes and saw belief, not the empty praise Claire lavished on Antoine, but genuine faith. And for the first time that night, she allowed herself to believe too. Still, danger lurked. Just after midnight, as the studio grew quiet, Amélie left briefly to fetch fabric glue. When she returned, her blood turned cold. The mannequin stood bare. Her dress was gone. Heart pounding, she raced down the corridor, searching every room, every rack. Panic clawed at her throat until she reached the storage hole. There, crumpled in a corner, lay her creation, pearls ripped, seams torn, satin stained with dirt. She collapsed to her knees, clutching the ruined fabric, her chest heaving. It was happening again. Another sabotage, this one final, merciless. Footsteps echoed behind her. She turned to find Antoine leaning in the doorway, his smile sharp as broken glass. Accidents happen, he said smoothly. Perhaps you should take this as a sign. Paris Fashion Week isn't for dreamers. It's for winners. Her vision blurred with tears, but she didn't look away. She forced her shaking body to stand, clutching the ruined fabric to her chest. And thieves, she spat, her voice low. Is it for them too? Antoine's smile faltered, just slightly, before he turned on his heel and disappeared into the shadows. Amélie stood alone, trembling. The clock ticked mercilessly. Less than 12 hours until the runway. Less than 12 hours until Jennie would appear. And now, nothing. Then Ethan appeared, breathless, eyes wide as he saw the destruction. No, he dropped to his knees beside her, lifting the torn fabric with gentle hands. His jaw clenched. They won't win. Not this time. We can't fix this in time, Amélie whispered, despair cracking her voice. Yes, we can, Ethan said fiercely. We still have the night. You've rebuilt before, you'll rebuild again. And I'll be here, every step, every stitch. Something inside her sparked, fragile, desperate, but alive. She nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Then we fight. Together, they carried the ruined gown back to her workstation. For hours, they worked side by side, Ethan threading pearls, Amélie sewing new seams with blistered fingers. They patched, they reinforced, they stitched with fury and love. The clock crept toward dawn, but exhaustion only sharpened her resolve. By sunrise, the gown stood again, battered but radiant. Stronger, perhaps, for having been broken. Amélie slumped into her chair, her body aching, but her spirit blazing. She looked at Ethan, who snapped one final photo of the finished dress under the pale morning light. This is it, she whispered. No more hiding. No more fear. Ethan nodded. Tonight, the world will see you. As the city stirred awake, Amélie closed her eyes, clutching the fabric one last time. Tomorrow, the runway would decide everything. And she swore, through exhaustion and fire, that when Jennie stepped into the light, she would not be wearing Antoine's lie. She would be wearing Amélie's truth. Paris Fashion Week. The Grand Palais Éphémère shimmered with lights, its glass canopy glowing against the twilight sky. Luxury cars pulled up one after another, spilling out celebrities draped in couture. Photographers shouted names, camera flashes exploded like fireworks, and the air vibrated with anticipation. Inside, hundreds of eyes turned toward Chanel's runway, the crown jewel of the season. Backstage, chaos reigned. Models hurried in and out of fitting rooms, stylists darted around with brushes and pins, assistants carried gowns like sacred relics. Amid the frenzy, Amélie stood frozen before her mannequin, the dress she had rebuilt through the night gleaming under harsh backstage lamps. The asymmetrical tweed jacket shimmered like molten silver, satin flowed like water, and pearls glittered like constellations stitched into the fabric. Her hands trembled as she touched the gown. This was it. The moment she had fought, bled, and cried for. Yet fear coiled tight in her chest. She could still hear Claire's warning, dreams are fragile. And fragile things break. Amélie. She turned. Ethan stood behind her, camera in hand, his face steady despite the frenzy around them. He gave her a small nod. They can't stop you now. This is yours. She nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. But even as she did, Claire's voice cut through the air like ice. Jennie's dressing room. Now. Amélie stiffened. Claire swept past, immaculate in her white suit, Antoine trailing like a shadow. The three converged at Jennie's room. Amélie hesitated, then followed, clutching her portfolio like a shield. Inside, Jennie sat before a mirror, her hair swept back, eyes lined with bold precision. Even without a gown, she radiated power, an idol, a muse, a force. Claire laid Antoine's prototype across the rack with a flourish. This will be your look tonight, she declared. Antoine stepped forward smoothly. Timeless, refined, flawless. It's everything Chanel represents. Jennie rose, gliding toward the gown. For a moment, Amélie's heart stopped. Was this it? Would all her work, all her fire, vanish beneath Antoine's theft? But Jennie's hand paused on the fabric. Her gaze flicked toward Amélie, standing silent in the corner. Where is the other one? Jennie asked. Claire's smile tightened. Unfinished. Inappropriate. You deserve the best, Jennie, not reckless experiments. Jennie's eyes sharpened. Show me. The room froze. Claire opened her mouth, but Amélie stepped forward before fear could silence her. With trembling hands, she pulled back the curtain to reveal her gown. Pearls glimmered under the light, satin rippled like liquid night, and the jacket's sharp angle seemed to defy gravity. Jennie's lips curved into a slow smile. This, she said simply. This is the one. Claire's face hardened to stone. Antoine sputtered, but, it's unstable, it hasn't been tested. Jennie cut him off with a glance colder than steel. I know what I want. The decision was final. Stylists hurried forward, carefully fitting Jennie into the gown. The fabric embraced her like destiny, every detail alive under her movements. When she turned to the mirror, even Claire could not deny the truth, Jennie looked transcendent. Ethan snapped photos, capturing the moment, the muse and the creation united. Proof eternal. Minutes later, the lights dimmed, the music began, and the runway show unfolded like a dream. Models glided down the catwalk, draped in sequins, tweed, chiffon. Applause echoed, cameras flashed. Yet everyone waited for the final look. Then the music shifted. The spotlight cut sharp. Jennie stepped onto the runway. The crowd erupted. Gasps, cheers, 1,000 flashes at once. She moved like fire wrapped in moonlight, the asymmetrical jacket catching the light, the pearls glimmering like stars. The dress was bold yet elegant, rebellious yet undeniably Chanel. It was everything Amélie had envisioned, and more. Backstage, Amélie's breath caught. Tears blurred her vision as she watched Jennie command the world's gaze in her creation. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. Her truth walked in front of thousands, broadcast to millions. The show ended in thunderous applause. Jennie paused at the runway's edge, striking a final pose as flashes blinded the air. And then, she did the unthinkable. She turned, eyes seeking Amélie in the wings, and mouthed one word. Merci. The room shook with applause as the lights dimmed. But behind her, Claire's eyes burned with cold fury, and Antoine's fists clenched at his sides. The battle was far from over. Yet in that moment, Amélie knew she had already won. Her name wasn't on the program. The press didn't yet know the truth. But the world had seen her vision. The world had felt it. And no one, not Claire, not Antoine, not even Chanel itself, could take that away. The echoes of applause still rang in Amélie's ears long after the runway had gone dark. Backstage was a storm of chaos, models laughing, stylists collapsing in relief, journalists clamoring for quotes. But in the center of it all, Jennie stood radiant in Amélie's gown, surrounded by flashes and microphones. Revolutionary. Fearless. Jennie's most daring Chanel look yet. Headlines were already being typed into phones, tweets firing across the world. Photos of the gown flooded social media, hashtags multiplying by the second. The world had seen, and the world had chosen. Amélie lingered in the shadows, her chest tight with disbelief. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, her design alive under the spotlight, but never like this, never with such thunderous validation. She wanted to cry, to scream, to laugh, but instead she simply stood, watching as her dream unfolded. Then Jennie turned. Amid the chaos, she walked straight to Amélie, her movements smooth, commanding. Conversation hushed as the idol placed a hand on Amélie's shoulder. "You made me feel powerful tonight," Jennie said softly, her voice carrying just enough for others to hear. "Don't let anyone steal that from you." The words pierced straight into Amélie's heart. Gratitude swelled in her chest, hot and overwhelming. "Thank you," she whispered, though her voice trembled. But as Jennie moved on, the shadows returned. Claire appeared, her smile icy, Antoine smoldering at her side. "You may think you've won," Claire murmured, stepping close enough for only Amélie to hear. "But this house doesn't run on applause. It runs on control. Enjoy your moment, because it will not last." Antoine's sneer was sharper still. "A child with a lucky break. That's all you are." Their words stung, but this time Amélie didn't shrink. She lifted her chin, the fire inside her untamed. "Maybe," she said. "But tonight, the world saw me. And that's more than either of you can erase." Claire's smile faltered, just slightly, before she swept away in silence, dragging Antoine behind her. The next morning, Paris woke to headlines blazing across every paper. Jennie's daring Chanel look steals the show. Chanel breaks tradition with bold innovation. The mystery designer behind Jennie's iconic outfit. Reporters clamored for answers. Who had created the gown? Antoine tried to claim it, of course, granting smug interviews, but his words rang hollow. Within hours, Ethan released his archive, photos of Amélie's sketches, her process, even the sabotaged fabric rebuilt into triumph. The images went viral, undeniable proof of the truth. By evening, her name was everywhere, Amélie Laurent, the young visionary behind Jennie's Chanel masterpiece. The recognition was intoxicating. Emails flooded her inbox from magazines, agencies, investors. Journalists requested interviews. Even rival fashion houses whispered offers. For the first time, Amélie wasn't invisible. She was undeniable. But with recognition came fallout. Claire and Antoine faced scrutiny, whispers of sabotage and corruption swirling through the office. Publicly, Chanel issued polished statements praising collaboration and team spirit, but behind closed doors the hierarchy cracked. Claire's grip weakened, Antoine's arrogance collapsed into desperation. And Amélie? She stood at the center, uncertain but unbroken. One evening, weeks later, she returned to the studio long after others had left. The mannequins stood silent, draped in half-finished dreams. She touched the table where she had once cried over torn fabric, where she had stitched through blood and exhaustion. The memory was raw, but the triumph sweeter for it. Ethan appeared in the doorway, camera in hand. "The world's still talking," he said with a smile. "They're calling it the birth of a new era." Amélie laughed softly, shaking her head. "It was just a dress." "No," Ethan said, stepping closer. "It was a fight. And you won." Silence stretched between them, warm and steady. For the first time in months, Amélie allowed herself to exhale fully. She turned to the window. Paris shimmered beyond the glass, the Eiffel Tower glittering like a promise. She knew the battles weren't over. Claire and Antoine would plot again, the politics of fashion would never vanish. But she was no longer afraid. She had survived. She had spoken. She had been seen. And as long as she kept designing, as long as she stitched her truth into fabric, no one could erase her. Amélie placed a fresh sheet of paper on her desk, pencil poised. The lines came easily now, bold and sure. A new silhouette bloomed under her hand, her future, her destiny, waiting to be born. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning.